I'm assuming you'll be wanting to know where it all started, which would be with Ernie Baxter. Our unit had been posted to the town for about 6 weeks, I think it was, and that's when they found him. He'd been up in the castle ruins, guarding the 2 navy guns that had been put up there to cover the approach to the harbour. Now, he was supposed to have been up there with another fella, Pete Webb. Problem was, Private Webb was something of a ladies' man, and he hadn't wasted any time finding himself a local girl to romance. From what we heard after, Ernie had agreed to turn a blind eye, whilst Pete sloped off into town to fool around with his little bit on the side. Anyways, Pete eventually gets back to the castle, after he finishes what he's been up to, and he finds it deserted. Try as he might, he can't find his Oppo anywhere, so in the end, he's forced to go and sound the alarm. It wasn't till the next morning they found Ernie, lying in amongst the trees, well down the hill from the castle, dead as a rock. There was no sign he'd been attacked by anybody, and after he'd gone and cut Ernie open, the local doctor came to the conclusion that he'd drowned. Funny thing, he wasn't nowhere near the water. He was found lying inside the tree line, well away from the beach, let alone the water. Looking back on it, I don't think anyone expected the CO to do any more or any less than he did in relation to what happened. You see, not long after we arrived, Lieutenant Jones was told his younger brother had been killed in a German bomber raid on Cardiff. He'd been something of a withdrawn sort even before that, right the way through our training, but this only served to make him even quieter. He sanctioned Pete Webb, sent him back to the battalion for a month of punishment, and then wrote the whole thing off as an accident. And that would have been the end of it, I guess, if it weren't for the fact that we went and found Johnny Payne lying dead a week or so later. Initially, after Ernie died, the lieutenant had been quite strict on making sure the patrols were being done proper again. But it didn't take long for things to settle back down again, the usual suspects slinking off here and there to have a smoke or nap. One of the other lads had been due to take over from Johnny at the searchlight battery, which had been put in place on our side of the harbour entrance. I forget who it was. Anyways, this fella turns up for his shift, and he finds Johnny lying half across the sandbags at the base of the searchlight, stone cold dead. Funny thing is, this time round, Johnny had been half stripped, with his trousers and his tunic missing, but his rifle, weapon and helmet still lying next to him on the sandbags. Naturally, the alarm gets sounded, again, and then all hell breaks loose, for the second time in 2 bloody weeks. It's not long for there's squaddies running this way and that through the town, not sure if it's an air raid or an invasion. Civvies everywhere in hysterics. Absolute chaos it was. Eventually, the lieutenant appears, and he manages to get things back in order. He has a quick gander at Johnny, and he sends everyone off to search all the buildings and the sheds, trying to catch whoever might have killed him. And it's not long after that one of the groups that's been sent out finds the chap they're looking for. There he is, wearing the missing bits of Johnny's uniform, desperately trying to hide himself in one of the outbuildings in the grounds of the hotel. It just so happened I was one of the ones with the lieutenant at the police station when the doctor came across to see him, having sliced Johnny open. I remember Mr. Jones's face when the doctor told him he'd recorded it as another drowning, even despite the fact that Johnny hadn't been lying anywhere near the water, again. Up until that point, our prisoner hadn't answered any of the questions that had been put to him, even when we'd informed him he'd likely be hanged as a spy, as a result of him not wearing a uniform when he'd been captured. Well, not one of his own anyhow. But when the lieutenant went down his cell and asked him how 2 of his men could have been found drowned on dry land, the lad sat in front of him broke down completely. Absolutely terrified now he was, and it was then he told us everything. Just how much danger we was in, and how we should get the hell out of town. Get away from the old bloody coast, if we could. The lad sitting in the cell told us his name was Barnsley, and he'd been a crewman on a steamer called the Almond Branch. Him and his mates had been sailing off the coast from London to South America, when their ship had been sunk by a U-boat. But the part that didn't make any sense was the date he told us. 27th November, 1917, right towards the back end of the last war. His story managed to somehow get even more peculiar after that. Him telling us that he was at the point of going under when somebody appeared and saved him. A woman, he said, all dressed in white, who pulled him under, but somehow helped him to breathe, then took him off to live with her, under the sea and away from the shallows. He claimed he had no idea how long he'd been there with her, or even what the year was now. All he knew was that she swore she'd never let him leave, and every time he tried, she'd find him and pull him straight back down into the depths to stay with her. But this time, well, he'd escaped. So now she must have come after him, and killed our mates when she came across them instead. Naturally, most of us thought he was spinning us a right old yarn, but the lieutenant, he seemed to think different. He thought the way this Barnsley looked, how bloody scared of everything he was, made his story seem genuine. And after that, he ordered that more guards be put in place at the station, and that every man and his dog be put out on the arbour defences that night. And it's not long after that she appeared. The witch. To tell the truth, none of the lads had been overly put out by the old affair up until this point. More a bit confused, to be honest. We'd been scared when we'd first been posted to the coast, expecting Hitler and his old fleet to come sailing into the harbour at any point. But when that hadn't happened, we'd got comfy. A bit lazy in truth. So even with Ernie and Johnny having been killed, and this lunatic sat in the cells, it all just seemed a little bit odd, as opposed to sinister. Anyways, all that changed not long after midnight, when there was shouting heard over from the castle. As well as the guns up there was another 6-pounder hidden down on the beach, ready to take out anything that sailed past St. Catherine's Point. So a group of us set off down there to see what's afoot, leaving everyone else sat ready at their positions. But whilst we were running down the road towards the beach, with the searchlights playing back and forth across the harbour behind us, the shouting stops. All of a sudden, like someone had just clicked their fingers and made us slow right down. I've never thought of myself as brave, but it ended up with me at the front of the group bullying the others to follow me. So we get to the beach and creep down towards the spot where the gun was tucked away, and we find the crew. All 3 of them, lying dead by the gun. One sat on the floor with his back to it, the other 2 curled up on the sand beside him, and her stood right next to him, staring back at us. A pair of endless black holes where her bloody eyes should have been. Truth be told, I didn't know what to do. I knew deep down those boys were dead, and there was nothing I could do to help them. And something in my head was telling me that if I tried to do anything to stop her, I'd be dead too. But George Hobbs, no, he felt different. His best mate was one of the ones lying dead in the sand next to her, and he wasn't having any of it. He throws his rifle down, pulls out his bayonet, and he goes for her, running down the beach like a man possessed. She looks up at him, stares him right in the face, and before he reaches her, he suddenly goes down, clutching his throat and kicking. The next thing, there's this foamy bloody mess flying out of his mouth, pouring down onto the sand around him. A minute later, and he's done too, lying there dead with the others, while she stands there, staring down at him. It's at this point, one of the lads behind me tries to get a shot off. He never makes it. As he's raising his rifle to fire, she turns her head, and her eyes meet his. Down he goes, choking and vomiting, as what looks like every drop of fluid in his body comes flying up and out of his windpipe, empty itself out, onto the sand. I figured the only thing to do at this point was to throw my rifle down, hold my hands up and show her I didn't want any trouble. Soon as I did this, so did the other lads, until we're all stood there, effectively surrendering to her. She takes a step towards us and raises her hand, pointing up to the town, to where he sat, Barnsley, the one she wants. Then someone steps forward, past me. It's Lieutenant Jones, walking towards her, slowly like. She turns to look at him, and we all think he's going to go the same way as George and the others, but he stops, and he starts to talk to her. Tells her she's already taken so much off Barnsley, how unfair that is, how he's tired of the war and what it's done to him, how he's prepared to take Barnsley's place. She raises her hand up again, ever so slowly, and waves him forwards, motioning for him to join her. And then they're gone, off into the water and away. I'm guessing you haven't found him since. We never did. We combed the beaches and the coast paths for weeks after. But he's gone, out there with her, and I think that might be the best thing for him. A couple of days after we reported the matter, a bunch of sailors turned up and took Barnsley off with them. I don't know what unit they were from. They didn't say, and they didn't have any insignia on. Their officer, he was polite enough, but there was an edge to him. One that made you not want to ask him questions. He might come back, I guess, one day, Mr. Jones, like Barnsley did before him. Or he might just end his days out there, with her.